Good morning, Youngstown Panthers. Again, my name is Michael Ryan, and I'm ecstatic to be in Mahoning County again. This is actually my third time speaking in this wonderful city, but my first time addressing a crowd of mostly young people. Youngstown is quickly becoming my second home east of the Cuyahoga River. I would say it's just like Cleveland, but there are too many Youngstowners who live and breathe for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh Steelers are curse words in Cleveland, if you didn't know that. I hope that my passion for the Cleveland Browns doesn't prevent you from connecting with me this morning. I want to thank Ms. Danko for that wonderful introduction, and of course Ms. Penny Wells, who invited me to be a part of the celebration of nonviolence. I had a chance to meet her when I was invited by Pastor Macklin to come and speak for Emancipation Proclamation celebration that the city puts on every year. And if you know Ms. Wells, when she asks you to do something, you cannot say no. And so I thank her for allowing me to be here this morning. I also want to thank my bailiff, Tony Williams. I don't know where he is, this light is blinding. He is my personal bailiff. He's been with me for, what, 7, 8 years now. And he does a wonderful job. He's more than just a bailiff. He's actually like a brother for me. In fact, we are really brothers. We're both members of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. Okay, that's right. Go, Mom. You know, my position as a juvenile court judge clearly demonstrates my support for any initiative that will reduce the amount of violence either perpetrated against or by young people. So that's why I was so willing to be a part of today's program. While we're on the subject of young people, I know many of you may have been a little confused when you saw me take the stage after they introduced Judge Michael Ryan. I know that I look more like the pump it up man for the judge as opposed to the actual judge. I debated on whether I should wear my robe because at least when I have the robe on, people believe that I'm a judge. When I don't have my robe on, people not only question if I'm a judge, they question whether or not I'm a college graduate. My youthful appearance isn't the only thing that distinguishes me from the traditional notions of what a judge looks like. I'm a male, and in Cuyahoga County, when you add all the judicial seats, including both city and county, which is over 70 judges, the majority of the seats are held by women. So it's, you know, unique to have a male as a judge. My uniqueness is even more evident when you calculate the number of African Americans that are elected countywide as judges in Cuyahoga County. Cuyahoga County is the largest county in the state. There are only 8 out of 59 judges who are African American. So that's 13% of the judges are African American in Cuyahoga County. We get into even more rare area when you consider that there are only 2 African American males out of the 59 who are elected countywide as judges. So that's a mere 3% of the judges look exactly like me. An even more distinct fact is that I'm the only African American juvenile court judge in the entire state of Ohio. So I'm 1 out of 110, which is only 0.9%. Not even 1% of the juvenile court judges are African American males. Those aren't the only things that distinguish me from my fellow judges. I'm also fairly knowledgeable about pop culture terms. Like my Twitter handle is The Land Judge. What does that mean? It's D.A. Land Judge, the judge from Cleveland, okay? I know that rocking an outfit means to wear clothes, not throwing something at them. I know that a thought has nothing to do with your mind. I know that cuffing doesn't always involve the police, but can also mean somebody that you're dating. I know that smashing doesn't just mean two inanimate objects like cars colliding. I know that when someone says cut it, they aren't talking about using scissors, they're talking about cut it. Okay? I know that whip isn't something that is used to tame or just used to tame an animal, but is this. So I know that hit 'em doesn't always mean physical violence, but is this. Okay? And there's one other thing, although Ms. Danko had talked a little bit about this, there's another thing that really separates me from my judicial colleagues, really sets me apart from them, and that's my rise to the bench. Unlike many of them who probably grew up in very functional homes with both parents who were college educated and even some who were attorneys or judges, you know, I didn't have that luxury. In fact, I grew up with, I didn't grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth. Instead, it was more like a plastic or wood. As Ms. Danko had told you, my mom was fairly young when she discovered that she was pregnant with me. I say fairly young, I mean much younger than most of you. I don't know, who was in here, 14? Anybody 14? 15? Okay. I see more hands raised at 15, but my mom was 14 when she found out she was pregnant with me. 15 when I was born, and that's startling for somebody to. I mean, just imagine you're 14 years old and you're about to become a parent. I think it was overwhelming for my mother. She was just a freshman in high school, and now she was about to be a parent. It was essentially a baby raising another baby. And she didn't have the assistance of my father, my biological father, because he wound up being arrested and charged for bank robbery shortly after I was born. In fact, I didn't meet him until I was about 22 years old. There were several reasons why he did not come back into my life after he was released from prison. One was, I think he just didn't want to. And another reason is because if he did try, there was already somebody else who had taken his place, my sister's dad. In fact, my sister's dad got involved with my mother when she was about maybe 5 or 6 months pregnant with me. And he, in fact, was the first person to hold me after I was born. He immersed me into his family. To this day, his brothers and sisters, I still consider them to be my uncles and my aunts, his nieces and nephews, my cousins, his mother, his father, my grandmother, my grandfather. They didn't treat me any different than they treated the other cousins, definitely didn't treat me any different than they treated my sister. In fact, at times, I thought they treated me better than they treated her. And, you know, she was related to them by blood, but it's because I probably look better than my sister. I think that's why. No, don't tell my sister that. My sister is a beautiful, beautiful young lady. But you would think that I would want to emulate myself or imitate my dad because of the fact that he decided to raise another man's child. This would be somebody who should be placed on a pedestal in the community, and everybody, you know, should follow his lead or his and model themselves after him. Well, I didn't want to be anything like him, and the reason was because I had too many horrific memories growing up, and actually nightmares of what he used to do to, or what he did to our family. There were many times from the time I was 4 all the way up until I was 11 that I would wake up in the middle of the night, or sometimes it'd be during the middle of the day, and I would wake up or I would run to areas because my mother would be screaming for help. Now, my mom was about 4 feet 11, 98 pounds at her heaviest weight. She's tiny. And my dad, stepdad, he was about 5'10", 5'11", my height, and a good 170 pounds, maybe a little bit more. And he would take my mother at times, and I would see him do this, pick her up and slam her on the floor. At times he would throw her up against the wall, slam her on the bed. One time, even outside, he picked her up and slammed her on the concrete. And then he would dive on top of her with his knee in her chest. That wouldn't be the end. He would then start to punch her and then start to slap her. At times he would choke her. And he did this all with my sister and I sitting there watching. He did this while my sister and I would be crying and pleading and begging for him to stop. I think that our pleas for him to stop actually fueled him. He'd get even more upset, more infuriated, and hit her harder and longer. My dad didn't do this, once or twice a year. It was almost like once or twice a month that my mother was brutalized. And I developed a hatred for him and an animosity for him that, I don't think kids should ever have. My mother was unable to break that relationship. And I said, 11, well, from 4 to 11, and obviously before that, she stayed. She stayed despite the fact that I had to get her the ice to put on her lips and her eye and her nose and her eyes because they were swollen. That she stayed despite the fact that I was taking face towels and paper towels and tissue to her so she can wipe the blood up. She stayed even though she had to put makeup on to hide the bruises, both on her face and on her neck. She stayed even though, she always had to get these sunglasses that she kept in the medicine cabinet to hide the black eyes that he had caused. She stayed. And I couldn't reconcile the fact that this man claimed that he loved her, but then at times he beat her like she stole the last dollar that he would ever have. Things, got even worse, or were worse for my sister and I, because not only were we witnessing that type of violence, we also witnessed, or we were the victims of abuse and neglect. Miss Danko, and I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Is it correct? Is it Danko? Yeah. Okay. She talked about how I went to, 11 different schools from kindergarten to 10th grade. And the reason why we moved around so much is, one, neither one of my parents had a high school education. Number two is that they both were addicted to heroin. And so they couldn't keep jobs. And when they couldn't keep jobs, that meant that they couldn't keep a home, at least a consistent home for my sister and I. So we moved all around the city of Cleveland. I lived in so many different neighborhoods, on so many streets. We even moved to California, and that was actually an attempt by my mom to get away from my dad. He followed us out to California and brought us back to Cleveland and moved us into a home with my aunts. And then we eventually moved to another house. And after we left that house, we moved to Longwood Projects. And that was probably the worst move that we could ever make, because it was in the Longwood Projects that our family just completely disintegrated. And I said it because my parents, they had greater access to drugs, easier access to drugs, and their abuse and neglect of my sister and I just went off the scale. A lot of kids, they they dislike the breakfast and the lunches that are provided at school because they just don't taste as good as what you get at home. Well, for me, because of the abuse that we were experiencing, breakfast and lunch were the only times that I was eating many days. And then I would be completely frustrated and concerned when the weekends came and the summers came, because then I find it even more concerning in terms of being able to find something to eat. When the summer came, I had to rely on the churches and the rec programs to get something to eat. And during the school year, on the weekends, I just relied on friends and families, or I just didn't eat at all. You may say, well, why didn't you have anything to eat? I mean, if your parents are down in the projects, you're probably on public assistance, you're getting food stamps. Well, my parents' drug use was so rampant and so extensive that they used to take the food stamps and convert them into cash. What did that mean? That meant more money for them to go buy drugs. What did that mean for me and my sister? That meant that we would be starving. And you're talking about a kid who wanted to move down to Longwood. I was 8 years old. And we were in Longwood for a good 4 years. The worst time in my life. Because not only were they abusing drugs, my dad was still brutalizing my mother. And so when they weren't getting high, they were fighting. Our life was complete chaos. I tell the story just to emphasize how desperate my sister and I were in this one particular time during the summer when I woke up and I was hungry, went to the refrigerator, didn't see anything, went to the cabinets that I could reach, didn't see anything. I went back to bed, and then I went back, got back up, went back to the refrigerator thinking that something would just magically appear. Unfortunately, it didn't. I went back to the cabinets that I could reach, and again, there wasn't anything in there. But then I remember, oh, wait a minute, there's a box of crackers up in one of the cabinets that I couldn't reach without assistance. So I put the chair up to the cabinet, opened the cabinet door up, there was that box of crackers. And I was saying, oh my goodness, I get to eat at least something. Pulled the box of crackers down, got off the chair, opened the box up. There was one wrapper left inside. And I pulled the wrapper out. I couldn't see inside, and I was feeling just the bottom, about 3 or 4 crackers in there. At that time, those crackers seemed like a steak to me, because I hadn't eaten anything the night before, and I'm thinking, okay, now I'm going to at least get some crackers to tide me over for the day. But when I looked inside, there were roaches inside eating the crackers. I let them have at it. I wasn't going to fight with the roaches that day. But that's just, one instance of how things were for my sister and I. When it came to, we weren't just neglected when it came to food, we were neglected when it came to clothes. I tell people all the time that I brought the style of skinny jeans in way before anybody else ever thought about them. And that was because while I was growing, my clothes obviously couldn't grow with me, and my parents, their focus was not on buying us new clothes. Their focus was on where we're going to get this next high. I washed my clothes out with the soap that you bathe with so that my friends would stop talking about the odor that was emanating from me. I didn't go outside when it rained because the holes in my shoes were too large, as well as the holes in my socks. We were mistreated, to say the least. And it was because of the drug use and the violence in our home that caused so much chaos and turmoil for my sister and I. And then things got even worse. I was like, how could they get worse? Well, my stepdad, he wound up going to prison. In fact, my sister and I was in court when the judge said, okay, 4 to 25, Mansfield, and he took them away. When they did that, my mother's drug use got worse. The abuse from my sister and I obviously multiplied. And it was my stepdad's mother, my Grandma Lula, who was essentially an angel. She came down to Longwood one time and saw the squalor we were living in and saw there wasn't any food in the refrigerator in any of the cabinets. She came back and brought us some groceries. The next time she came back, she saw the same conditions and she said, okay, that's it. That's enough. I can't let you kids suffer anymore. And so she decided to remove my sister and I from my mother's custody. She didn't go to Children and Family Services. She didn't call the police. She didn't call juvenile court. She just said, I'm taking you guys away. And I was like, thank God. For one reason, because I knew going to live with her, I was going to eat. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Knew that. I knew going to live with her that we weren't going to be moving from house to house, from neighborhood to neighborhood. I knew going to live with my grandmother that when I woke up in the middle of the night from a nightmare, or I just woke up the next day, she was going to be home. Too often when I was living with my parents, at as young as 4 up to 11, my sister and I would wake up in the middle of the night and there'd be nobody home. Can you imagine the fear that we had? The concern that we had? They wouldn't come back until the next day, and then when they did come back, they were both high. I knew that my grandmother was going to provide the protection and the love and the nourishment that my sister and I needed so that we could not just survive, but thrive. I knew my grandmother wasn't going to take us out throughout the city on drug runs like my parents did. Take us to drug houses, sit us in the car, leave us in the car by ourselves as kids while they went up and got high, and then come back and then drive us under the influence throughout the city while putting us at risk of being harmed. I also was thankful that my grandmother took us away, not because I thought our needs would be met, but that my mother would, obviously put her life back in order, go to rehab. But unfortunately, she never did that. In fact, her drug use got worse to the point where in March of 1985, we had to go to the hospital. And that day, I had seen, I saw my mother in a horrible state. Before I had seen her beat up, I had seen her high, but I had never seen her that that emaciated, that weak, that beat up like she was on that day. And my sister had to help her from her bed to the restroom and back. And my sister was only 12 years old at the time. And so that was concerning for me. And so my mother got back into the bed after my sister really essentially dragged her from her bed to the bathroom. And my sister and I turned and looked at each other, and we started crying because we were really concerned about my mom. I mean, she went from, like I said, told you, 98 pounds at her heaviest weight. She looked like she was 78 pounds on that day. And my sister and I turned and looked at each other, and we started crying. My mother says, "Why are you guys crying? It's not like I'm going to die." And she was pretty adamant about that. But a month later, on Easter Sunday, she did. As Ms. Danko told you, she was 28 years old. I was 13. When my mom died, all my dreams and hopes that she become the mom that I thought she was destined to be died that day. She didn't even see me get promoted from the 8th grade to high school. She didn't see me graduate from high school. She didn't see me, obviously, graduate from college, law school. She didn't get a chance to see me get sworn in as a judge. She missed out on the opportunity to help me raise her grandkids, meet my wife. And then my grandmother, you know, I'd been living with her for about 1.5 years before my mom died. And then the year after my mom died, my grandmother had been that rock for me and my sister. And, you know, I had to go to her to ask her to explain to my sister and I why, you know, all these things were going on in our life, why we had so many challenges and hurdles. And my grandmother, you know, she gave us good advice and comforted us. And then my grandmother got sick. And she died a year to the date, almost a year to the date that my mother did. Same month, just a few weeks later. Thank you. And so now my head's spinning because my mom just died. My grandmother, who had been the caretaker for my sister and I, she just died. My sister and I had to go live with my stepdad's sister, my aunt. And then she couldn't take care of my sister and I. So a year after living with her, we were in another house. And we had to go live with another aunt. Again, this is my stepdad's sister. So I was with her for about 1.5 years. And then eventually she said, okay, I'm moving to a smaller home. And, you know, Mike and Sharice, you guys were the last two to come and first two to go. I just can't care for both of you anymore. And so now we're in a bind. Where do we go? Thank God my mother's mom got notice of our situation, and she returned from New York to take care of me. By the time she got back, though, that was my senior year of high school. I was the kid who wasn't supposed to make it. Through all the troubles and challenges that I had, I wasn't supposed to be, you know, a senior at one of the most prestigious public schools at that time, and that was the Cleveland Heights High School. I wasn't supposed to be the kid who was going through not just their standard classes, but the gifted and talented program. And it's difficult to get into Cleveland Heights' gifted and talented program. But I was there, and I was doing well, and I was competing with those students. I wasn't supposed to be the kid who graduated, but I did. I wasn't supposed to be the kid who got scholarships leaving Cleveland Heights. And I definitely wasn't supposed to be the kid who went to Allegheny College in Meadville, Pennsylvania, private liberal arts school, only about maybe 45 minutes from here, if that. And I definitely wasn't supposed to be the kid who received the scholarship there, actually a 3-year renewing scholarship there, which defrayed a lot of the costs that I had, that if I would have had to pay for my entire education at Allegheny, it would have cost me $60,000. I only paid $6,000, they paid $54,000. I left Allegheny to come home to go to law school, Cleveland Marshall College of Law. Graduated in 3 years. Definitely wasn't supposed to be the kid there. Definitely wasn't supposed to be somebody who got 2 scholarships and passed the bar on my first try. I've been a lawyer since the age of 25. I've been a judge since the age of 34. I am currently now 45, and I've been on the bench for 11 years. I was actually the youngest African-American male elected in the history of the Cleveland Municipal Court. I'm the second and youngest African-American male to be elected as a juvenile court judge, and as I told you before, I'm the only African-American male who's a juvenile court judge in the entire state of Ohio. You know, more often than not, when I give people the opportunity to ask questions after I finish telling the story, someone asks, how did you make it through all of those challenges, all of those obstacles? Well, there are a number of factors, but they all revolve around one big theme. I recognized that the choices I made could cost me my natural life or the life that I envisioned having in the future. I had to learn to make prudent choices at a young age, knowing that those choices would shape my future. I had to choose to find other ways to cope with my dad pummeling my mother, as opposed to choosing to take a weapon and extract him off of my mother. Would I have been justified? Probably so, but it would have left an emotional scar on my heart and my brain that could have impacted my growth and my development. Calling the police and getting my mother help would have been better choices. I had to choose not to join a gang, despite being persuaded to do so by friends. I knew that being in a gang would lead to me engaging in crimes that could cost me my freedom and the life that I envisioned having. I couldn't be admitted to college of my choice with gang affiliations. My options would have been severely limited. I also knew that I faced mandatory confinement at the Ohio Department of Youth Services if I was found delinquent of a gang spec, just like you could be. I knew that making the choice to be in a gang could lead to rival gangs wanting to fight and increase the probability of me losing my life. I had to make the right choice. I had to choose to make a sacrifice to not eat or to not have the necessities other kids did, like clothes that fit and shoes and socks and underwear without holes. Or instead, I could rob, steal, and burglarize to get what I needed or I wanted. I had to make that sacrifice. I chose to sacrifice as opposed to engaging in those behaviors. I knew that if I made the wrong choice, I could lose my life, because the person who I tried to rob or burglarize could have had a weapon and been justified in using it against me. I could have been caught and thus saddled with a felony, and thus making it hard for me to get accepted into college or law school, hard for me to become an attorney. Because not only do you have to graduate from law school to become an attorney, but you need to pass an interview that assesses your character and fitness in order to sit for the exam to even become a lawyer. Even if I would have been able to overcome that hurdle with a juvenile felony record, that would have been a huge barrier for me being elected as a judge, because no one wants to elect someone who has a criminal past. If I had to choose to give up and succumb to distractions, I had to choose things and give up. Now, if I had to choose to give up and succumb to distractions of too much television or video games, hanging out, chasing skirts, then I wouldn't have been able to do so well academically and create multiple opportunities for myself where I control what I wanted to do and wasn't limited because I didn't make choices that resulted in limiting my ability to select my own destiny. If I would have made the choice to watch more TV, playing on the video games, going out to the parties, over reading and studying, I couldn't get the A's, which resulted in the high GPA and the scholarships that followed. If I would have chose to party instead of working out or just chilling, then I would have gotten some assistance from my college to defray some of the costs because I played football and I ran track, in addition to doing well academically. I knew that I had to choose to walk away from my girlfriends and my wife when I was involved in heated debates with them, so I wouldn't even put myself in a position to engage in a violent physical altercation with them and thus repeat the behavior and abuse and emotional scars on them like I saw my stepdad inflict on my mother. If I did choose to repeat his behavior, it would have cost me my freedom and also the life I envisioned as a productive member of the community, and even more so as a judge. If you're convicted of domestic violence, that never comes off your record. And I seriously doubt that anyone would vote for a person as judge who beats women. I had to make the choice not to engage in illegal drug use and or sell illegal drugs. I had been offered illegal drugs, which also includes weed, for those who just don't think that it does. Ganja, Mary Jane, all that. And knew that if I chose to engage in that behavior, it could cost me my life like it did my mother. She started off with marijuana. That led to heavier, more addictive drugs that cost her her life. Even if it didn't cost me my life, using marijuana could cost me the life I envisioned, because it kills brain cells. I wouldn't have been smart enough to become an attorney. The jobs I was employed at as an attorney required me to take drug tests, and since it was and still is illegal, I would have lost my job. Moreover, no one is going to elect a judge who has a criminal conviction for drug possession, even if it's for marijuana. You have choices that you must make as well that are similar to mine. Are you going to spend less time tweeting, Snapchatting, using Kik, sending DMs, going to parties, twerking, and or are you going to devote more time to reading, to studying, and not studying just the day before, hour before a test? Are you going to devote more time to listening to adults and your peers who are engaging in positive activities and events? Are you going to listen more to the administrators so you can increase your options for success as opposed to limiting them? Are you going to stop making excuses for not being as bright as you possibly can be? After hearing what I went through, how can you now make any excuses? I didn't, and look where it got me. I am a 45-year-old male working at a job where I don't have to work 8 hours. And I make upwards of, I don't know what it is, I think it's $130-some thousand. You can check it on the website. I think that's a pretty good living, especially in light of where I came from. For those of you who haven't been through what I've experienced, you have no excuse whatsoever not to reach your full potential. The last thing I want to leave you with is a quote from Marianne Williamson's book, and it's called A Return to Love. And in the book, she says this quote, which I have used consistently throughout my engagements with young people, and I hope it's something that resonates with you. But her quote says, "Our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our greatest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, to be gorgeous, to be talented, and to be fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be?" is what she says. So essentially, she's saying that you cannot be afraid of the talent that lies within you. You have no right to suppress it because you believe that it will take too much hard work for your talent to be illustrated to the world. You have an obligation to cultivate your talent and reveal that talent for the world so that we can be the beneficiaries of your gifts. So I leave you with that today, is don't be afraid of the talent that lies within you. Thank you for being so attentive this morning, and congratulations on being able to celebrate another wonderful Nonviolence Week.